أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد, we continue with the chapter of marriage from the book Umdat Al-Fiqh, and we are up to his statement رحمه الله: وليس لولي امرأة تزويجها بغير كفئها بغير رضاها والعرب بعضهم لبعض أكفاء وليس العبد كفء الحرة ولا الفاجر كفء العفيفة. It is not for the guardian of a woman to marry her off to one who is not her match, unless she agrees. Arabs are matches for one another. A slave is not a match for a free woman, and an immoral man is not a match for a chaste woman. When you talk about here al-kafa'a, a person being a match, it is talking about a person who is in line with the person that they are marrying. And there are different ways for you to evaluate that. So it could be, some of the ulama said, the education level, the wealth status, the religious status, the family name that they're from. All of these things may affect them. And if you practically come to apply this, you find that some people get upset, and a person who thinks about it logically, inshallah azza wa jal, he won't have a problem with it. But this is to do with, again, the benefit and the betterment of the marriage and the longevity of that girl's happiness and her goodness. Now, this is another means and tool that the Sharia uses to make sure that the girl is not harmed. Here, he says that it's not allowed unless the girl is pleased. So again, remember when we spoke last week and we spoke about the role of the guardian and the wali and how the Sharia looks out for the girl, and that's why they place the wali. And if the wali does something that goes against the best interest of the girl, then the Sharia stops them, the law stops them, etc. This is another example. Even though he's her father, he can't just marry her to anyone. The person that he marries her to needs to be someone appropriate for this girl. Someone that she's marrying, the person that she's marrying needs to be appropriate for this girl, unless she accepts that person. Now, unless she accepts that person, this is also a reason for the father to reject. This is also a reason for the father to reject. So we'll give some examples and then some practical examples of why some people get upset today regarding this matter. So we said the guy needs to be kuf, he needs to be a match for the girl. Let's say this girl is from a wealthy family and someone poor comes and asks for a hand. The dad says no. Why? Because you do not have enough wealth to marry my daughter. Is he saying this out of arrogance? Is he saying this out of pride? Is he saying this because he thinks that he's better than the other person? Not necessarily, but he understands that in the long term, his daughter might be affected because those around his daughter, like her sisters, her cousins, etc., they're going to live a certain lifestyle that this husband currently can't provide. So is it haram for them to get married? No, it's not haram. It's not haram if the girl agrees. If the girl agrees to get married to this man who is poor. But if the girl doesn't agree, then it's not allowed. And if this man, this wali, does not want his daughter to be married to this person, it's a valid reason to say no. And this happens a lot. You see a lot of people, they fell in love, and then after they fall in love, then they start worrying about, in 2-3 years' time, the reality of life. Her sisters are going on holidays, her sisters are driving nice cars, her sisters are living in nice houses, and because the man can't afford that, she feels embarrassed in front of her own family. I know in one case, it was about, for example, presents. The sisters were buying nice presents for their parents, and they couldn't afford it. They were buying the most basic of things. So someone may say this is shallow. You can say whatever you want. But the reality is, if you look at real life, get rid of the emotions, get rid of the first honeymoon stage of period, the first honeymoon period stage of marriage, a person starts to worry about these things. A person starts to worry about these things. Then you got your kids, inshallah, in the future. Your nieces and nephews, they're wearing nice clothes, going to good school, etc. And your kids are left out. Why? Because there was a marriage that wasn't a match for that person. You have also, for example, education. Some of the ulama also consider education a means of necessity, a condition for there to be a match. So if, for example, the girl is a doctor and the guy is a carpenter, there's nothing wrong with being a carpenter, there's nothing wrong with being a doctor. Is it halal for them to get married? It's halal for them to get married. But again, the father cannot marry the daughter of this carpenter if she's a doctor without her permission. And the father can reject on the basis that the educational levels are not the same. Someone may say, "Okay, what's the educational level got to do with each other? And what's it got to do with the matter? How does that affect?" Anyone speaking to a doctor and anyone speaking to a carpenter, if you've spoken to both, you will know that they're not going to be able to have a good conversation at home. Now, he's thinking, he talks one language, he talks another language. So what's going to happen? Yes, at that beginning stage, there may be some bonding emotionally, but when you come practically to life thereafter, where the emotions have settled down a bit, and now it's about logic and rationale and reason, they're two different people. They can't be on the same page. Same thing with their friend circle. Usually, if she's a doctor, she's hanging around usually other professionals, other people who are well educated, people whose husbands are well educated, etc. So now she wants to take this carpenter to these meetings, and they're all doctors, and he's a chippy. And they're like, they can't have one conversation. Now, they're talking one language, and Haram, she's embarrassed because the guy barely finished year 10. And now he actually got permission to leave in year 9 because he had an apprenticeship. Now, different people are different. So realistically speaking, it causes a problem. Realistically speaking, it can cause a problem for this girl. So some of the ulama said also, the education. Some in terms of the family. Okay? For whatever reason, you may have in society someone who is considered to be from the very high class. For whatever reason. Their last names are, mashallah, very special. Okay? Now, if she gets married to someone who, again, for whatever reason, they're from a family that's not as respected in society, that can bring down the status of that girl that's getting married to them. And this happens a lot, especially in certain cultures. This happens a lot. Be very careful to mistake this matter for a person thinking that Islam makes a person better because they have money or they're educated or they're from a particular family. In Islam, who's the most honored with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The one who has the most taqwa. Inna akramakum 'inda Allahi atqakum. Verily the most honored amongst you with Allah Azza wa Jal is the one with most piety. This has nothing to do with your standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what we are talking about is a person and life, and how this marriage choice will affect their life. This has nothing to do with your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So in society, you may be from a certain family, certain respected family. And if you get married to that family which is not respected, again, the respect level of that girl or the harm on that girl or people talking about that girl is not necessarily, could cause harm to her. And a lot of females, for example, yes, at the beginning there may be that love, so she's willing to overlook, but then later on when people are talking about her and her husband and her in-laws, it can affect her a lot. Okay? Or when she has children and people talk about that family in a negative way because of whatever their standing is, whatever their reason for being that low in society is, it affects her. So again, the Sharia is looking out for her benefit. So there's a lot of reasons that the ulama use in terms of who is an appropriate match and who isn't. And this is something that is considered in Sharia, and it's something that a lot of people get very upset with. Why? Because here in Australia, we have many different nationalities, which means many different madhahib, many different opinions. And so you do, a lot of the time, especially because of the amount of free mixing that we have, the amount of haram that we have going on social media and the like, a lot of the time you do have a girl falling in love with a guy, and that guy knows how to sweet talk, and they're not on the same level. They're not on the same level. Then they go to get married, and her parents say no. For example, he's not as educated as you, or he's not as wealthy as you, or whatever it may be. And then they call up the sheikh, and the sheikh says yes, 100%, that he is in the right. So a person needs to understand this is from the Sharia. The sensitive one is when you start talking about nationality. If a person is from one nationality and a person from another nationality, is that a reason for the father to say no? Again, we preface and we say, you being from one nationality does not mean that that person is better than you. Again, Islamically, no one's better than anyone in terms of race. We know the famous khutbah of the Prophet ﷺ, Khutbah Al-Wadi', the farewell sermon. The Arab is not better than the non-Arab, and the non-Arab is not better than the Arab, and the white's not better than the black, and the black's not better than the white. This doesn't exist in Islam. But for whatever reason, this nationality does not want to get married to that nationality. If there's, again, problem that's going to be caused to the woman. Let's just give an example. Should we talk about Indians and Pakistanis? Yes. Brother, from what country are you from? India. He loves Pakistanis until it's cricket time. When cricket happens, oh, big mashakil, big problems. I have a Pakistani that's married into my family, mashallah, a most humble guy, until the cricket comes on. When the cricket comes on, oh, Allahu Akbar. Okay, wala and bara. Naam, Abu Bakr versus Abu Jahl. No in between. Now it's big dramas. So sometimes you may have someone, for example, he says, we're not married to this nationality for a particular reason. Because there was war between the countries, and if my daughter marries from that nationality, the guy may be a very good guy. But if my daughter marries from that nationality, people in my family will cause problems for us. Or they'll boycott us. Or where's the Libyans? Where's the Libyans here? No Libyans? Tayyib. For the Libyans, if a Libyan girl, now it's becoming a little bit easier, if a Libyan girl, for example, gets married to a non-Libyan guy, boycotted by the whole tribe. Now I'm boycotted by the whole tribe, so the father may say, I don't care, it's not me, I don't have a problem with that guy getting married to my daughter, but if we get married to that, if my daughter gets married to that guy, my whole tribe is going to boycott us. We can't even get back to our own country. Now no one's going to talk to us and we're all going to be cut off, etc. So there may be a reason for the father, even based on nationality, for him to say no. Sometimes even it's just a cultural difference. And this is important. And again, you can't think emotionally. You have to think logically, you have to think reasonably, you have to think into the future. Sometimes you have an Arab wanting to marry a non-Arab. And this was, one guy is Lebanese and he called me up and he wanted to marry a girl who was Afghani. And her parents said no. Her parents said no. Because he was Afghani and because he was of a trade and she was very well educated. And so when he asked me, I think he thought I was going to say, Akhi, you're 100% in the haqq. Go, I'll do your khat maktab without her dad even there. So when I said he's 100% right, he got so cut. He got so cut. And he goes, La, and how can you say that? And that's wrong and sure. Okay, it's your fault. You're the one that spoke to her in the haram and fell in love with her. Then come blame me for your haram. If you didn't speak to her in the haram, then you wouldn't have fallen in love with her. You didn't fall in love with her, you'd accept my answer. But you're cut because you fell in love with the haram. Okay? Now, what's her dad's perspective? Forget the education for a second. Her dad is not saying every Lebanese person is bad. He's not saying if you're from Lebanon, you're a munafiq. He's not saying that. But he's saying we don't speak Arabic and we don't speak English and you're going to get married. How are you going to interact with my family? How are you going to interact with my family? You're going to come over, no one can communicate with you, you can't communicate with us, so what's going to happen? You're never going to visit us. So what's going to happen with us and our daughter? We're going to lose our daughter. He's looking at it from that perspective. And or culturally, you guys do certain things culturally that we don't do, and it happens a lot with nationalities. For example, maybe a Lebanese man expects XYZ from his wife. So if he marries from a culture that doesn't do that, there's major marriage issues later on in the marriage. So you don't want that. So from the beginning, the father may say no. He may have valid grounds to say no. Again, there's difference of opinion with a lot of these conditions. But because you live in Australia and it's multi-madhab, which means multi-opinions, because it's multicultural, you need to accept that there are going to be some cases where it's not going to be allowed. That dad's going to say no. And you should respect that. Because there's going to come a day, inshallah, where you have a daughter and you may be very well be put in that situation. Okay, so respect the dad's decision and don't fall in love in the haram in the first place. Try if you want, but if it's a no, khalas, move on with your life. Now, move on with your life so that you don't cause major issues. So this matter of kafa'ah is a big matter. Okay, it's an important matter and it's a matter that we should pay a lot of attention to. I remember a long time ago, this was before I was married. So maybe 17 years old or something. Alhamdulillah, I was in i'tikaf and I was at GIYC. In GIYC there was a lot of South Africans. Now, so I said to myself, you know what, I like these South Africans. They're not bad, maybe I'm looking to get married, maybe I'll think about a South African wife. Then in the i'tikaf, one of the brothers told me that in the South African household, the men have to wash the dishes. From that day, I prayed janazah on the idea of ever marrying a South African, and I said, Salaam alaikum. And I said, well, I'm going to marry a Lebanese girl, inshallah. Yeah, right, no way. Okay, but it happens. It happens that people, they marry to a certain culture, and they have certain things that they expect from the husband or from the wife, and the other culture doesn't do it. And a lot of marriage problems happen because of this. A lot of marriage problems happen because of this. So no matter what you do, even if you do get married outside your culture, make sure from the beginning, you guys agree on what's expected. Now in the engagement process, make sure you agree on what's expected from the opposite party in that marriage. وَلَيْسَ الْعَبْدُ كُفْءَ الْحُرَّةِ. A slave is not a person who is a match for a free woman. وَلَا الْفَاجِرُ كُفْءَ الْعَفِيفَةِ. And an evil person, a person who's not righteous, he is not a match for a woman who is righteous. And this is very important. A lot of parents, they want their daughters to marry people that they want, even if they're not righteous. If your daughter, alhamdulillah, she's good, she's upright, thank Allah Azza wa Jal, and look to marry a righteous man. Try and look for a righteous man for your alhamdulillah. It's a blessing from Allah that she's righteous. Then try and get her to marry a non-righteous person. And if a daughter does not want to marry this type of person, and she comes and says later on to a sheikh, my parents want me to marry this person and I don't want to marry them, the sheikh can easily stop that, because one, it's not with her permission, and two, even if it was with her permission that she's happy to marry this person, and others come and they say, pause, there's an issue here, they can be, it can be taken to court Islamically, because it can bring shame on the family, etc. So there's a whole thing to do this in Sharia. 2 points on this. Number one, if a person looks at this, it's only to do with the girl. It's only to do with the girl. So a girl, the guy has to be a match for her. As for a guy, he can marry a woman who's not a match for him. So let's say he's wealthy and she's not, that's fine. He's from a very good family, she's not, that's fine. Okay, the condition is only for the woman. Again, to protect the woman. Second thing, a lot of people in the marriage, so now they got married, they were fine. They were both on the same level. Then inside the marriage, problems happen. And this is a big point. Okay, inside the marriage, problems happen. The woman can seek a divorce if the man drops from this condition. Examples. I don't know if we're ever going to finish this book, but alhamdulillah, no problem, inshallah. Let's say the man was very wealthy and he married the girl, and alhamdulillah, they lived a good lifestyle. And for whatever reason, business didn't go so good and the guy had to go bust and bankrupt. So now you have to help me out with areas. Okay, I'll just say use Sydney areas. Now they can't live in Mosman, they have to move to Miller. Okay? For those that know Sydney, know exactly what I'm talking about. Miller's down the road from my house. They can't live in Mosman, they have to live in Miller. That woman can actually ask for a divorce. That woman now, if she's from a wealthy family, she can ask for a divorce. Because he can't provide that level that is a match for her. Okay? Again, someone may say, Akhi, but that's shallow, and that's. Say whatever you want. That's her decision, that's her choice. It's halal. You like beef, she wants to be a vegetarian. No problem. You do. It's halal. Okay? No one understands how it affects the person individually. Just think of the embarrassment and the shyness in being with any family members if this happens. Okay? It can be very problematic for a person. Very problematic. Now, if you think, no, I'll support my husband no matter what, alhamdulillah, barakallahu fiki. May Allah bless you and your marriage and your children, inshallah, never happens. But different people are different and the Sharia gives them that choice. Okay? If a woman's a billionaire, if a woman's a billionaire and her husband makes $0, okay, she is not obliged to give him 1 cent. She's not obliged to give him 1 cent. He still has to provide the shelter, the clothing, the food, etc. He still has to. And if he can't, she can ask for a divorce. Even if she's a billionaire. If she wants to give sadaqah from her to him, that's from her goodness, and it's a reward for her. Now, but she's not obliged at all. She's not obliged at all. Another very common example, because that's not as common, okay, but a very common example is in the religiosity. If a woman is a chaste woman and her husband cheats on her, this is very, very, very common, unfortunately, when it comes to seeking divorce. If the woman is a chaste woman, an upright woman, and her husband cheated, this is a a means for the woman to ask for a divorce. Okay, because she's chaste, she's modest, and now she's a good woman, and he's proven himself to be bad. Or, even more common, he gets addicted to drugs. Okay, he gets addicted to drugs. Or she finds out he's been gambling, etc. These types of sins, if she's a good woman, a righteous woman, and he's fallen into these mistakes, and she asks for a divorce, that is 100% within her right. Now, we're going to get into matters of divorce, etc., 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 but just to quickly mention now, it is not automatic that if a woman asks for a divorce, she has to drop some of her rights. A lot of people think this, that if the woman's the one that initiates the divorce and he asks for the divorce, she has to give up some of her rights like khula. This is incorrect. If the woman has a reason to ask for the divorce, like he cheated or he's not religious anymore or he gambled or whatever it is, she can be granted the divorce by the judge with her complete rights. Okay, because she didn't come out of nowhere. It's when does she give up something from her right is when there isn't a clear reason, but khalas, she just doesn't love him anymore, whatever it is, and she wants to leave and she's not willing to stay with him. That's when the khula is asked and he can ask for some of his rights back. Okay, but this is something that we'll get to inshallah. We'll move on to the woman who a person cannot marry. Okay, al-muharramat fi nikah, people who are not you're not allowed to marry. In terms of people that you're not allowed to marry, there's different reasons why a woman will become haram for you. For example, one of them is lineage, your relationship with them. You're related to them, like your mother, your sister, your daughter, etc. These people you're related to, so you can never get married to them. There's people who you can never get married to because of marriage. Okay, so when you get married, your mother-in-law automatically becomes a mahram for you for life. Naam, so you can never marry your mother-in-law. Even if you get divorced from your wife, you can never get married to your mother-in-law. That's why even if you get divorced, like or your wife passes away, now you can still hug your mother-in-law and kiss your mother-in-law and travel with your mother-in-law, etc. Now she can take the hijab off in front of you. You can never marry her. Now same thing with a stepdaughter. Now if a man gets married and the woman has kids, once they've consummated the marriage, that stepdaughter becomes mahram for him for life. Now there's reasons for there to be mahram from radha, from breastfeeding. Okay, and we'll get to that inshallah. If there's 5 full breastfeeds, then that person becomes mahram for that woman and anyone else that normally they'd be a mahram from if they were their child, like the man and the sisters and everyone else. Okay, and we'll speak about that inshallah azza wa jal. There's also when it comes to mahramiyya, a person who is mahram forever, okay, like your mother and your mother-in-law, and there's people who it's temporary, like a woman in her iddah, or your sister-in-law when you're married to your wife, because you can't marry 2 sisters at the same time, or your wife's aunties, you can't be married to a woman and her auntie at the same time. But if a person wants to get divorced, Islamically, he's allowed to marry his ex-sister-in-law or his wife's auntie. Now, so there's forever, and then there's temporary also. Anyone know any other means of divorce? Anyone know any other means of a person not being allowed to marry someone forever? Besides anything that we mentioned? So there's lineage, there's musahara, yani being because of marriage, you can't marry someone. There's through breastfeeding. Anyone know any other reasons why you can't marry someone?
The Prophet's wives.
The Prophet's wives, of course, yani, but that's gone.
Someone's already married for.
If a man's already married 4, good. Okay, if a man's married 4, then obviously he can't marry a 5th. He'd have to get divorced first. Does the man have a iddah? No. You sure?
He said last
3 أيام. أصبحت محمودا. Does the man have a iddah, yes or no?
No.
You sure?
He said last week.
I didn't say anything last week. There's things that people said I said last week. I said no, I don't know what you guys were listening to, man. Everyone's accused me of things I said last week. I didn't say anything last week. Does the man have a iddah, yes or no? You all said no. I say yes. Now think about it. I'm telling you yes.
What is it?
The waiting period. You know when a woman gets divorced? There's that waiting period before she can get remarried. So does a man have that?
After the fourth wife divorced her, he's got to wait because he can take it back.
Good. Ahsant, mashallah, tabarakallah. Who said Spark is unsmart on very? If a man has 4 wives, for example, if a man has 4 wives, all of these we have to edit out. If a man has 4 wives and he divorces one and it's the first or second divorce, so she's still in her iddah. So technically, she's still his wife. Technically, she's still his wife. So he needs to wait until she's finished her iddah until he can actually get remarried. So it's not Islamically, you don't call the man having a iddah, it's not called a iddah. But practically, he's not allowed to get married in that period because he's still technically married to 4. Until she finishes her iddah, then he can. Unless it's the 3rd divorce, that's a different story. There's no iddah for the man in the 3rd divorce. Any other reasons a person can think of? Naam, Hamza.
Consider the father's mahram. Like, would you say that's niche as well?
Yes.
My father, all his mahram. It will be my mahram.
Yeah, that's from lineage. Anyone think of anything else? Anyone heard of al-li'an? Al-li'an. If a husband accuses his wife of zina, we'll get to it inshallah. We'll get to it eventually inshallah. But this is something else. If a husband accuses his wife of zina and he goes before a judge and he's made to take the oath, etc., he can never return back to this woman. They're automatically separated and he can never go back to this woman. Now, so like this is, again, there's a lot of big things in the Sharia that a lot of people neglect. Okay, but we'll get to it inshallah and the conditions and the rulings, etc. Okay. It's going to be over 2 lessons. I'll give you the easy ones first and then inshallah Azza wa Jalla will delay the harder ones or the little bit harder ones till next week. He says rahimahullah, وهن الأمهات والبنات والأخوات وبنات الإخوة وبنات الأخوات والعمات والخالات وأمهات النساء وحلائل الأبناء والأبناء والربائب المدخول بأمهاتهن. These are the women that he can never marry, and now the mothers, so your mother, and when you say mothers, you're talking about mother and above, so the mother, your grandmother, etc. You can never marry your mother, you can never marry your daughters and granddaughters, etc. You can never marry your sisters. Sisters here, which type of sisters?
The wife alive?
Blood related. Blood related.
Your blood sister and
Step
your
Half sister.
half sister. Step sister is not mahram for you. A person can marry his step sister. She's not mahram. So again, for those that just need a bit of clarification, you got your full sister, shaqiqa, from the same mother and father. From the same mother and father. Then you've got half sister, so you share one parent. For example, your mother, you have a mother, now and from a father, then your parents get divorced. Now, then your mother gets remarried, and then they have a child, and that's a girl. So now you and her share the same mother. You have different fathers, but you share the same mother. So now you are a half sibling. That woman is mahram for you. Now she's your sister, you can never get married to her. Step is when you have completely different parents. She's got a mom and dad, you've got a mom and dad. Your parents get divorced, her parents get divorced. Then they marry. Her father marries your mother, for example. She is not mahram for you. You can't see her with a hijab, you can't touch her, and that's a woman that you can marry, Islamically. Now, so this is very important for the parents to make sure when they do have, if they do are in this situation, how they go about the guidelines with that, because they are not mahram for one another. Paternal aunts and maternal aunts. Paternal meaning they are from the, your aunt is from father's side. And maternal aunts, your aunt is from your mother's side. The wives of your fathers. So there's obviously your mom, but if your father has married another woman besides your mother, you can never marry her. Now, and the wives of your sons, same thing. If your son gets married, you can never marry her. Even if they get divorced or your son passes away, you can never marry her. And the daughters of wives. Now, if you have a daughter, if you have a wife who's got a daughter, so your stepdaughter, but on condition that you've consummated the marriage with the mother. You've consummated the marriage with the mother. So if a man gets married, okay, to a woman and she's got a daughter, if they've done the contract and they've consummated the marriage, now that daughter becomes a mahram for him in the sense that he can never marry her. If a man gets married only, does the marriage contract, okay, and then for whatever reason says, I want to get divorced, I don't want to get through with it, and then later on he wants to marry the daughter, Islamic that's allowed. Okay, Islamic that's allowed. So the stepdaughter, once the marriage is consummated. As for the opposite, yani your mother-in-law, if you marry a woman, as soon as you do the marriage contract, automatically, her mum becomes mahram for you. Okay, it's not a condition that the marriage is consummated. This is a small difference.
So, Sheikh, is that also like
Excuse me, sir, we're now in question time. I'm going to put this camera on you and show this is the only person who would do that. La ilaha illallah. Actually, there's someone else, but alhamdulillah, he's learning his lesson. Well, this is not everyone, okay? This is not everyone, but this is just a beginning, an introduction. Inshallah Azza wa Jal will continue with the rest next week, inshallah. There's a lot. طيب هذا والله أعلم. صلى الله عليه وسلم محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.